Hey you guys, welcome to day 3 of VBS. I'm so glad you all could join us today. I wonder what story we are going to learn about today. So let's get right into it.
Hey champs, welcome back. It's day 3 of Vacation Bible School 2020. How are you feeling? Did you get a friend? I sure hope you did. Come on, everybody give me a fist bump. Come on, give me a fist bump. There you go. High five, everyone. So good to have you with us. Let's get into it. Day 3. All right, lesson number 3. In this lesson, you will learn about Abraham and his promised son. People were even worshipping idols by this time. But there, in the middle of all these nations and peoples and gods and stories, was a man named Abraham. And God chose this man because he was another guy like Noah who believed. Originally, his name was Abram and her name was Sarah. Abram and Sarai. But God took his name, Yahweh, and he put that H in their name and made a covenant with them. And when God made a covenant with them, with Abraham, it became Abraham and Sarah, and God became one with them in the promise that he was going to do something amazing. So Abraham and his wife, originally called Abraham and Sarah, now the Lord changed their names, and Abraham and Sarah were new named people after the covenant with them. Abraham and Sarah, they lived in a land called Haran. Say Haran? Haran. And their story is written in the 12th chapter of the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 12. And from that, it's a long story. So from that chapter onwards. One day, the Lord said to Abraham, Abraham, I want you to leave your country. Leave your country. Go away from your family, your father and all that you've ever known. All your favorite playground and your where you grew up and your school. I want you to leave everything. And I want you to go to a new place that I am going to lead you to. And I am going to set you up there, and I'm going to make you a great person there, great leader, a big name. And I'm going to give you lots of people and lots of children and lots of cattle and riches. And I'm going to make your name great, and everybody's going to salute you. And all the nations through you are going to be blessed. Everyone's going to find a blessing through you. You know what he was talking about? He was talking about a seed. Do you remember? The seed, a child that's going to come from Eve is going to be a blessing to the whole. See, God doesn't forget his promises. God never forgets his promises. And if he has to pull you out of where you are, if he has to pull you through a flood, if he has to pull you out of some lost country that you've gotten involved in, or a confusion of some construction site, he will get you through all of that, and he will make sure that he has his way. You know, that's why I always stick with God. I stick with God because I know that no matter what happens, his way will always happen in the end, and I will be a success. And Abraham was a guy who believed God in the same way. So God said to him, get out of your country, and I'm going to take you to a new land. Not England, new land. I will make you a great nation, and through you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. All the nations? Wow, that's some promise. Imagine if God came to you and said, hello, Joshua, or whatever your name is, and says, I want you to come with me because I'm going to make you a blessing to all 197 nations that are on the face today. United Nations will talk about you, of what a blessing you are. And through you, your name, and through your seed, everyone's going to get something amazing. What if he did that? Wouldn't you feel special? Abraham knew that this was a promise worth believing God for. So Abraham believed. Abraham believed. See, God has something special for those who believe. God has a family who believes. God has an ark for those who believe. God has a plan for those who believe. It all rests on faith, and Abraham rocked faith. Say that with me. Abraham rocked faith. Okay, so he packed his bags, his Samsonites, and all of his Bori Bistar, and he packed his family and he set out on a journey saying, wife, we're going, we're moving, we're out of here. And they didn't know where they were going. They didn't know which train to take. They didn't know where to book their tickets. But he obeyed God, and just like yesterday's lesson, just like Noah, he just set out with his family. And even though they didn't know where they were going and nothing made sense at the time, Abraham started walking. When God says move, you move. When God says walk, you walk. And once you start walking, he then shows you the steps. Are you listening? Stop scratching. Look at me. Yeah, okay. So God did bring them to the promised land. He did. And they were happily settled there, and they loved the place and the waters and the mountain. They loved it. But they didn't have any children. No one to go out and play in the water. They didn't have any children. And then they began to doubt God. You know, whenever time passes, when a promise has not been fulfilled, we doubt God. We start thinking, either he's forgotten or he never intended to fulfill his promise. Time always does that. So faith is always tested with time. Faith is always tested with time. And faithfulness is always over a long period of time. And if you decide that you're going to trust God, you need to decide that you'll trust God for whatever and for however long. Say that with me. For whatever and for however long. Because doubts will come. And they doubted. Because, you know, the promise that God had given to them, he said, I'm going to make you, I'm going to bless you, I'm going to make your nation name great, and I'm going to make you have lots of children. What? God, lots of children? I don't even have one child. How can I have lots of children when I don't even have one child? So they doubted God, and they got worried, and they began to wonder if God had forgotten them. And they became very old in the meantime. How on earth are they supposed to have children now? So they had this bright idea. Let's have a child with one of our servants. Bad idea. Because whenever you decide to help God with his promises, you never come out looking good. After they made this decision to have a child in the wrong way, God reminded them that he had not forgotten his promise. He had not forgotten his promise. God did bring them to the promised land, and they were happily settled. They didn't have any children, but God was going to make it happen. And soon, just like God promised, a baby boy was born. This was surprising news to Abraham and to Sarah, who were 190 years old respectively, but a baby was born. Abraham and Sarah wished they had been patient. They'd wished they'd stuck around. They'd wished they'd kind of just let God do his thing. If God's going to promise, God's going to make it happen. Sometimes even people who believe make mistakes. Sometimes even people who have great faith, sometimes even they doubt. So when you doubt, it's okay. It's okay. But we got to come back to God's plan. And they wished they had trusted God, but they had failed to trust him in everything. They trusted him in some things, but they didn't trust him in everything. But God is a faithful God. Say it with me. God is a faithful God. Say it again. God is a faithful God. He kept his promise to Abraham and to Sarah, and they did have a baby boy, and that boy was named Isaac. Say Isaac. Isaac. In the original language, some of them call it Isaac, but we will call it Isaac. All right. So Isaac was born. Will this be the boy? Will this be the son? The seed promised who will crush the head of the devil, the serpent? Is this the guy? Come on, let's see. Hang on. As the story unfolds, we're going to find out over these next few days who that person is. So there was no end of happiness with Abraham and Sarah. They took him to McDonald's, they took him to the park, they took him everywhere, and at last God's promised son had been fulfilled. God had fulfilled his promise, and there they were cradling this little boy. They were having a great time. And one day in Genesis chapter 22 verse 2, God spoke to Abraham again. Whenever God speaks, he's always going to challenge you with something big, huh? So God spoke to Abraham, and he says, you enjoying your little boy? Is it fun? You love your son? Oh, yes, he's fantastic. Oh, he's so cute. We've taken lots of pictures. Yeah, well, this is what I want you to do, Abraham. I want you to take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and I want you to go to the land of Moriah, and I want you to offer him as a burnt offering on the mountain in which I tell you. What? Offer my son as a sacrifice? The very next verse, verse 3, it says, So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey, took Isaac with him, and went to the place that the Lord told him. I just find that fascinating. How can you give up your son, Abraham? Abraham's thinking, how can I give up my son? But the bigger question is, how can I disobey God? When my son is God's plan, and when my son is God's answer, and then my son is God's request, how can I disobey God? How can I not give God back when he has given me everything? He must have been scratching his head and wondering, I don't get it. First, I don't have any children for a long time. Then I have one child, and God is going to promise me hundreds and thousands of children. And when I get one child, he wants me to take that child's life. He wants me to sacrifice that one child. What is God thinking? See, that always happens. Faith and the question about what is God thinking always wrestles. Like a boxing match, you know. My faith is always boxing my mind. And my mind's thinking, what is God thinking? And my faith saying, just do it. And my mind is saying, what is God thinking? And my faith says, just do it. And that fight will always be on. But the question is, faith must win. Faith must always win. So he must have been wondering, how is God going to fulfill his promise and make a great nation when he wants me to sacrifice my only son? It didn't make sense to Abraham, but he trusted God anyway. I want you to write that down. But he trusted God anyway. The word trusted in any way always goes together. When you have to trust, usually it's never going to make sense. So, at the very last second, Abraham took Isaac, and when he had put him on the altar, he said, Isaac, get on the altar. And Isaac didn't understand. He thought his father was being terrible. He didn't know what was going on. He must have been such a confused young man. And he put him on the altar. And Isaac, with such a heavy heart, I can't imagine what was going through. He lifted up the knife to sacrifice his son. And as he said, Lord, if this is the only way to obey you, if you want, I'll do it. If you ask me, I'll do it. If this is the only way to do it. And then a voice came from heaven, Abraham, stop. He said, yes, Lord, stop. Now I know you love me. Now I know you love me. Don't worry about it. I was just testing to see whether you love me. And then in that moment, Abraham heard a sound. And he looked over, and there was a ram that was stuck. His horns were stuck in the bush. And he grabbed that guy, and he made him the sacrifice. And God spared Isaac. This is getting closer and closer to that seed, that one person who's going to come, who will be the sacrifice. And in his sacrifice, he'll crush the devil. And the story is getting closer and closer to the Son, the Son, the Son of God. As we get closer, we'll get to know how God has weaved in through all the stories of all the people's faith and their obedience and their doubts and their confusion and their obedience, till he finally gets to that one person, the seed who will eventually crush Satan and crush deception. Abraham sacrificed the ram, and God spoke to him again saying, great blessing. He reminded him. He said, see, you trusted me and I came through. I am going to keep my word. Great blessing is going to bless Abraham with. I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven and the sand on the seashore. In your seed, all the nations will be blessed because you obeyed my voice. God promises, we obey, God blesses. Say it with me. God promises, we obey, God blesses. Just like God promised the one of Eve's offspring. He said to Eve, one day I'm going to bring a seed that will crush the head of the serpent. He promised Abraham also a seed through his children that will going to be a blessing to everybody. Who will it be? Was it going to be Adam, Eve, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac? Who's it going to be? Eventually Isaac grows up. Who's Isaac? The son of Abraham. Isaac grows up and he married a girl called Rebecca. Then 2 sons were born. They had twins. And their names were Esau, say Esau, Jacob, say Jacob, Esau and Jacob. And in their culture, whoever's the firstborn, whoever comes out first, whoever's the oldest child, they have like rights. They have like birthright because they came first, which means the best of the best cattle, the best land, the best money, the best everything in the family from the father would come to the firstborn. He had the birthright. Everybody else got the leftovers, but he had the birthright. And Esau and Jacob, Esau was the older one who came out first. He had the birthright. And when Esau grew up, he became a hunter and Jacob became a farmer. One day, while Jacob was cooking something he grew from the farm, he was making dal. The Bible says it was lentil soup, so it's essentially dal, but let's call it a stew. Say stew? Stew. While he was making that stew, Esau came back from his hunting trip and he didn't catch anything. He couldn't shoot anything. That day he didn't get anything. So he came back. He's like, oh, Jacob, I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry. And Jacob was like, yeah, really? Well, it'll take a while to make. No, I'm so hungry. I need to eat. He was very hungry. And he says, I will give you some of my broth if you want. Oh, yes, please. Give me some of your broth. Can I please have some of your stew? And he says, no, I'll give you on one condition. Okay, anything, just give me, I'm so hungry. He says, you give me your birthright. Ooh, Jacob was a crafty man. He's like taking that opportunity to rob, to deceive Esau of his birthright. But this guy was so hungry, you won't believe, he agreed. He was so hungry. Have you ever been so hungry that you'd be willing to do anything? Esau agreed to trade his birthright for a bowl of stew. I guess the blessing, his father's blessing, didn't mean as much to him as his food. Some people are like that. They don't know what's really valuable. And Isaac was getting old. Before he dies, he has to give his blessings to his son. So Esau is the firstborn, and he's the one who should be getting the blessing, the biggest blessing, the best of the best. But remember, he sold his birthright. He had sold his birthright to Jacob, who had craftily conned him out of his birthright. But when the time came, Rebecca wanted, that's the mother, he wanted Jacob to get the birthright. So they tricked Isaac. Because, see, Esau was a very hairy guy and Jacob was smooth fella. Okay, so what they did is they put some sheepskin on Jacob, and then they sent him in, and they said, oh, this is Esau, bless him, this is Esau. And Isaac was old and blind, and he was like, okay, I blessed him and gave him his birthright blessing. So he deceived his older brother Esau. And when Esau found out about it, chapter 27, verse 41 of Genesis, when Esau found, he said, what? He took my birthright? Oh, I'm just to wait. When Isaac dies, when my father dies, I'm going to kill Jacob. Rebecca heard that. His mother heard that. And he said, my goodness, I'm going to have to hide. So she said to Jacob, you better run away. Esau's really mad. You better run away. And she sent him far, far away. Let me stop there. A lot of stories, huh? We got Abraham, we got Sarah, we got Isaac, we got Rebecca, we got Esau, we got Jacob. 3 generations in one story. Not too bad. And some of us have grown old listening to the story itself. But what did we learn? We learned that God makes a promise, we obey, God blesses. Now, you may have heard the story of Abraham and Sarah. You may have and Isaac and Jacob and all of these guys. You may or may not have heard it, but we're going to do it together. And every story after story, we're going to see that silver lining through of the seed that's going to come that will crush the one who deceived Adam and Eve. God's going to get back at that one who deceived Adam and Eve. You deceived my child. You took away my children. You made them bad. You made them choose wrong. I'm going to help them choose right. Do you want to choose right? Do you want to be like Abraham and Isaac? Do you want to be someone who trusts God when everything else looks like it doesn't belong or it's different? When people laugh at you, are you still willing to trust God? Because when God makes a promise and we trust Him, God blesses. When God makes a promise and we don't trust Him, we lose out on God's blessing. People will keep laughing. but we must not lose on God's blessing. Say to yourself in your heart, we call it praying. Say to yourself in my heart, Lord Jesus, God, I don't know what you want from my life. I don't know what your promise is to me yet. I'm going to find out. But the moment I find out your promises, Lord, I'm going to believe you. In my whole life, if everyone laughs at me, I'm going to believe you. No matter what you call me to do, no matter what you ask me to do, if you can bring a flood and still save a family, if you can call a family out of nowhere and make them somebody everywhere, if you can keep your promises, God, I'm sticking with you because you're the only one who finishes what he starts, and I want to finish with you. That's a prayer that you'll never regret praying. All right? God bless you. See you tomorrow. Day 4, bring a friend. Bye-bye.
Wow, the story of Abraham and Isaac. That was a great story. I'm sure you guys had a fun time listening to that. It's now time to go and join your group captains on your Zoom meetings.